24th episode of Pamela Politics. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Senator Tim Scott, a whole lot about what's going on with President Trump, and the fentanyl bill has passed, and the South Carolina GOP has moved back the presidential primary. So there's a lot to talk about, a lot of things to unpack. First, and this is my co-host,
John Cummings. Good morning.
And John and I were just having a conversation about the utter insanity that was yesterday, or actually the past couple of weeks, really, with questioning and the FBI failing or refusing to withhold documents. And it's a lot of shenanigans. And I contend that the cake is already baked, and they've already made the decision. President Trump is guilty, and this is just a formality. The whole trial is a formality. So John has some comments on just the way things have been handled of late with our U.S. Congress. So go ahead, John. Share what you were just talking about.
I really think that the one thing that just jumps off the page, if you watch these hearings, right, with Durham or whoever else it is, they swear these people in, right? These people that are brought to testify, in some cases subpoenaed, they are sworn in to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And if it's found that they were, not truthful, they in fact can be prosecuted and put in jail, right? They can be. They usually not, but they could be.
Right.
My contention is what they need to do. They need to change, and you need to change the Constitution to do this, I think, is that, or at least the regulations regarding the House, they should swear in the members who are conducting the hearings. Because you had a parade of people up there yesterday, Democrats, who lied. They lied up and down on the stand. And so they're not held to that same order where you have to be truthful. Yet the person who is testifying to try to help you out, supposedly, they're held to that higher standard. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. And as long, I'm sure that they didn't put that rule in originally because they probably didn't think anybody would out and out lie like that. And it probably was like that at one time. But it's not like that anymore. These people are there. They have no scruples, no morals, no nothing. They'll lie about anything. And you saw it all day yesterday. And even on the Republican side, the only person I saw that had any real chops, although Russell did a decent job, he kind of kept it down the middle, but he had some good questions there. Matt Gaetz just destroyed Durham. And he destroyed the whole investigation. He's basically like, wait a minute, you spent millions of dollars, you had years and years, and you couldn't find Joseph Misford, who was the guy who was at the middle of all of this. He was the guy that was contacted to start the ball rolling, and they couldn't find him. They found his lawyer, right? So they found his lawyer, but they couldn't find him. So, I mean, you spent all this time, all this money, maybe should have had the CIA get involved. They would have found him because they found him the first time. I mean, for sure. And let me tell you about Mifsud for a second, where this name comes from. I mean, this whole thing, and Matt Gaetz said this yesterday, that was an op. The whole thing was an op. And Mifsud was at the middle of it, right? I was at a broadcast of the John Batchelor show, who is on ABC radio nationally. And this is before I even announced I was going to run. So it's 2019, but probably in the spring, right? So it was a live show in Manhattan, and Devin Nunes was one of the guests, along with Andy McCarthy, who I grew up with, and Thaddeus McCotter. And we talked about Mifsud that night at the broadcast, because I know McCotter and I grew up with Andy, so I was right in the middle of all of it. They were talking about Mifsud that night. That's over 4 years ago. And you had millions and millions of dollars and unlimited investigators, and you couldn't find this guy. They can't find anything when they don't
playing peekaboo. We can't see him.
Right. They'll find you. They'll find you if you're going to Latin Mass. But if you started an op, you're not going to find you. The whole thing's a charade. The whole thing is a charade. It's all one big FBI cover up. They covered up the Mueller probe, which was insufficient. Mueller did nothing. Durham did nothing. And the only way any of this is going to come out is if the people in Congress, House, in particular the Judiciary Committee, they just take what information they get and present it to the people. They got to stop saying, well, we have this information. No. That's exactly what the other side did during the Russia probe with Trump. Well, we have all this information. That's what Schiff did. I have all this information. I've seen this information, but he never produced it. So obviously he lied, which is why he got censured. Well, guess what? Now the Republicans have the information. Put it out in the newspapers. Put it out everywhere. Just say, here it is.
Everywhere.
Let everybody see it.
Yep. I 100% agree. And that's a frustration is that, like you said, Schiff constantly said, I have this information, I've seen this information, and yet he lied. There was no such information. It was completely fraudulent. And we need to start holding these folks accountable because right now it is not sufficient the way in which anything else that occurred. And then, of course, what your point being that even if they lie, even if the witness lies on the stand, we have to count on the Department of Justice to actually press or bring charges. Now, the Congress can say, "Look, this guy lied. We got him lying. We charged him." Well, the Department of Justice can just say, "I want to," and there's nothing we can do because they don't have the power. Congress does not have the power to obviously act in that manner because that's a separate branch. So
And that's why
that's
when it,
frustrating.
when it comes to Hunter Biden and the
Yeah.
Bidens in general, all the Bidens who are allegedly on the take, and I said this last week or 2 weeks ago, if the feds aren't going to do it, we
Yep.
need state attorneys general to step up
Yes.
in any state where they conducted banking activity that was fraudulent and
100%.
charge these people, charge them,
Yeah.
cuff them, drag them in, and put them
Mhm.
put them under oath, even though they're going to lie. But put them under
Right.
oath and present to people what exactly is going on. I'm sitting here in a monsoon. That's why I looked at the window.
No, no, yeah, as a
Uh,
monsoon, and my cat's over here acting like a crazy
yeah.
person. Yeah, and
But that's
I
what they
agree
need
with
to
you.
do. Start charging people at the state level. The
Just
feds,
like
look,
Alvin
it's simple.
Bragg charged
Feds,
Trump.
yeah,
Yeah.
the feds are not going to do their
No,
job.
clearly
They're
not.
not going to do it. And
Clearly
it's
not.
clear. The attorney general is compromised. They're all compromised. They have no interest in the rule of law. So we need state attorneys general to step up. Like I know in Mississippi, there's an issue down there with the banking and the Bidens.
Yeah.
Call on the attorney general. Hey, go to work and get it done because the feds aren't
Yes.
doing it.
I agree with you
That's what
100%.
federalism is all about.
Now let's jump quickly over to the town hall that occurred here in Erie County, Myrtle Beach, last night with Senator Tim Scott on the really well watched Sean Hannity show on Fox. So let me again, we were talking
Sean
before
who?
the show. Yeah, exactly. How's the Hannity program doing these days?
He finished a couple of nights ago. He finished 20th in the ratings behind Joy Reid. Now, Joy Reid's show, I've seen the numbers on that
Bad.
show. It's usually around 850,000 viewers in the entire nation in that slot. Now, I mean, there's 350 million people in this country. 850,000. Just to give people some perspective, Rush Limbaugh and his show when he was on from 12 to 3 on most of the country, he had 18 million listeners.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh,
Now
yeah.
Right. Now you're talking 800, and even Hannity. Hannity nationally was up around 12 million at one point. But you know what? When you are part of Fox and you're going to stay in the middle now, you're going to try to walk that line just so you can keep your job and make a lot of money.
Yes.
Well, don't be surprised if you lose your audience, and that's pretty much what has happened at Fox, and deservedly so.
So I take it you did not personally attend the town hall here in Myrtle Beach?
No. And
I mean, come on.
I really think, I mean, personally, I think that any Republican, I mean, I understand people are interested in Senator Scott. He's a good man. I don't think anybody would deny that. And it's not my choice for president, but he's a decent man. And my thing is, if you were part of a Fox night, you're part of the problem. You're part of the problem because, I mean, this is Murdoch TV. That's what it is. It's Murdoch TV, and they hate our movement. They hate us. They hate everything about us.
Yeah.
So
it's not just Murdoch, it's
it.
BlackRock. BlackRock is a huge problem.
Of course.
In fact, for just a quick second, James has started a new group called O'Keefe Media Group, OMG. And he recently had an undercover female who went in and met with one of the BlackRock recruiters, if you will. And the things this guy shared is pretty daunting. So BlackRock last time that BlackRock owns part of Fox. So really,
I think 15%. I think 15%.
So who paid who? How did that all work out?
They own part of Dominion too.
And as I understand it, they're the third largest entity in terms of owning things and money. They're pretty big. That's an interesting thing. So I agree with you. That's why I don't watch Fox. I quit watching Fox, and they took Tucker Carlson off. That was it for me. I said no more Fox for me. But let me ask you the question that really matters is: do you think Tim Scott's, did that move the needle for anybody? Is anybody now saying, "Oh wow, geez, I'm going to be for Tim now. I'm not going to vote for whoever I was supporting previously"? What are your thoughts?
I think it'll move the needle a bit, but I don't see. I mean, you could look at all the polls that are out there. Senator Scott in South Carolina, he gets, I think the highest I saw was 12.
Yeah,
And look, this is Trump country. I mean,
yeah,
Trump won big in this state, and I don't think that's going to change. In fact, I think it could go even more so with Trump. It seems the more trouble they give him and the more indictments they put up there and the more they try to take him down, the more popular he gets. I said that a long time ago.
yeah,
Why don't they just not cover him? you
yeah,
know, it's like the fire that needs more air. If you just keep giving him more air, I mean, the fire gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And you would think they would have figured that out by now. If you just try to leave him alone, he's going to have to create his own media. And when he creates his own media, sometimes he speaks a bit too much and he gets in trouble. But to
right.
keep throwing these, I mean, they're just lobbing him softballs, and he just keeps hitting them out of the park. And they're gonna do it, I think, to their own detriment.
Yeah, and I've conceded multiple times that I am supporting Ron DeSantis, and I think that this is a for anybody outside of Trump to capitalize on, because I do agree with you. This is Trump country. So I don't know that. I just don't believe that Tim Scott or Nikki Haley or anybody is going to be able to come in here and knock Trump off his difficult. That Ron DeSantis has the largest ground game of any candidate currently in South Carolina. So, and speaking of that, so this past meeting, we discussed last time that the SCGOP executive committee had voted to ban the state EC member Davis from attending, but they also took care of some other business, and they voted to move the presidential primary back to February 24th, which now gives us, I think you said
I think
Nevada's,
it's 15 days. It might be 15 days.
yeah, yes, 14 to 15 days now. We give candidates, that's like 2 weeks in between the Nevada primary before the first in the South Carolina primary. So that's going to have 2 weeks. In those 2 weeks, folks, hold on to your dentures, because you're going to get inundated with, how many candidates do we have now for president? What is it, 12? I don't even, I've lost count.
Yeah, I don't even know. I mean, eight people that are in it.
Yeah.
With Chris Christie jumping in. I'll use the term loosely because I don't think he can jump. Um, it's that's a guy who just never mind.
We don't want him to
Uh,
jump, frankly.
no, no,
Uh,
no, no, not unless
yeah.
we want registration on a Richter scale now. But yeah, I'm not a fan of his. And I was in New York when he was governor of Jersey, and boy, he was, he came out like a house of fire and represented himself as one thing, and then we find out later that he's not that. In fact, he's the guy. I mean, big Trump supporter. Remember, he was a big Trump backer
Oh,
in
yeah. Oh, yeah.
2016, and guess why? He's the reason that Christopher Wray is the FBI director.
Oh, wow.
That was Christie recommended him strongly because Christie was in justice with him. So anybody that has a background in that Justice Department, you really have to look at from the side and say, hey, wait a minute, let's check this out. I mean, I know there was a lot of people that worked in justice together. Some really good people came out of there. I mean, Mark Levin, obviously, Ted Cruz, Giuliani. These are from serious legal minds who are prosecutors and put away a lot of
Right.
people. Andy
So
McCarthy was on
let me back
Fox.
up. I want to repeat that one more time. So Christopher Wray was recommended by Chris
Chris
Christie.
Christie, yeah, yeah, he's a Christie guy. Yeah, I mean they were all in
Well, I didn't
justice
like Chris
together.
Christie, but now I'm like, forget him.
Yeah, I mean, it's just he is that guy. He's an establishment guy, and they're
Yeah.
all in the middle of it. And you saw Durham yesterday. He's a Barr guy. Right? He's a
Yeah.
Bill Barr guy.
Yeah.
They're all from that lineage, and so is Ray. And they all go. It all goes back. I'll go back further. It all goes back to Louis Freeh and Comey.
Yes.
Comey was Louis Freeh's guy. You want to really get into some deep weeds here. Go try to take a look and see about Louis Freeh and his relationship in Romania and the Bidens. And
Oh, there's no.
Louis Freeh giving 100,000. Louis Freeh gave $100,000 in cash to grandchildren of Biden's, not the one that he just found out about, but grandchildren. He put it in their trust, $100,000. What a nice guy. Why do you get $100,000 cash from an FBI director? I mean, I know he did other things, but I mean,
Exactly.
dive into that. It all goes back to Louis Free, and then if you're a conspiracy theorist, you can really go to town on Louis Free. But I mean, there's so many layers of corruption. It's the onion. I've talked about that for
Yeah.
years. I talked about it when I ran for office. It's the onion. You peel the onion back, and guess what? There's more onion.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you said it because, again, going back to OMG, which is O'Keefe's new media group, and the undercover work that they did with BlackRock, this gentleman that they were interviewing or not interviewing, I don't know what you call it,
Secret camera,
outing,
yeah.
I guess. Yeah, secret camera.
Candid camera.
And it was multiple times, like just one particular, sit down meal. It was like this was different locations, a long period of time. So apparently she was, I don't know, dating him. I don't know, but anyway, in that he actually made the comment, and I thought it was funny. He said that U.S. senators are really cheap. He goes, for
Yeah.
$10,000 you can buy a senator. Oh wow! So dollars being put in Senator Biden's
And tell you
account.
what,
That's a
yeah, ten
big chunk
thousand
of change.
dollars. Joe
Yeah,
Biden loses that in the mattress at night when he falls
yeah,
asleep. I mean,
exactly.
it's $10,000 is nothing. But I was thinking to myself the same thing. I'm saying, $10,000, you could buy a senator for $10,000. When I was in law enforcement in New York, we had a
Yeah,
voucher $250,000 cash from a bad drug deal.
yeah,
$250,000 just sitting there cash. And everybody's like, why didn't you take it? What do you mean, why didn't I take it? It's not mine.
yeah,
Right?
yeah. I
So
ain't going to prison.
I wouldn't do it for 250 and they're going for 10. Wow, I really
Yeah.
had the bar pretty high.
Yeah, I don't even know. It's sort of disparaging. I mean, not disparaging. What's the word I'm looking for? Disheartening to
Yeah.
see that our elected officials can be so easily bought, and they can just throw away we the people like that. So, um,
Well, if you know what, if you wanted to see all of it go away, I'm a First Amendment guy, but boy, it would be a different world if we had no lobbyists for sure.
yeah. So now you got Tim Scott, you got Nikki Haley, the judge that is presiding over Trump's case, break the cases. The one in New York City is stupid. I mean, it's the dumbest one of all
It's
of them.
yeah.
It's
And then they
just
just came out that
nonsensical. I mean, they're all
that
dumb. But,
yeah, they came out that Bragg withheld tons of exculpatory evidence. I mean,
mm,
so much of it, I couldn't believe it. So,
it's
I mean, it's probably,
he
any
should be
federal,
brought up on charges.
oh, without a doubt, any federal judge should
Yeah,
throw all of that out. It should have never come up in the first place because the whole case is specious at best.
yeah,
But
yes,
when you're not turning, I mean, that's one of at the heart of our legal system is that when you're on the prosecution side and you're investigating a crime and you come up with information that would help the defense, you are bound by the Constitution to turn it over to the defense. All
right,
right, that's part of the beauty of our system is that it's
yes,
always aimed to benefit we the people and not
yeah,
the government. The burden always has to be on the government, and
hmm
that's one of the most important things. So when you have people withholding exculpatory evidence, which would clear you, that's a clear violation of the Constitution, and he should be brought up on charges himself, but he won't be.
probably just barred. Yeah. Well, anyway, back to the judge. She moved the venue from Miami. My gosh, it just went right out of my. I can't remember. I forget where she moved it to. But anyway, she said she may have to move it again. But I believe the first court meeting or trial date is August 14th. Now there's talk about it probably will get pushed back a little bit further, but the expectation is before the election. So let's just play the what if scenario, because I talked to somebody about this the other day and they go, well, they're trying to get him arrested and convicted so he can't run for president. And I said, well, actually he can still run. Just because he can literally be in prison and that does not to run for president. Now, obviously, it's campaign across the country because he's locked up, but you could still vote for him. And theoretically, if he wins the presidency from behind bars, he could then give himself a presidential pardon and then he'd be out of jail. But I think, let's be honest, they're not going to do that because I think he'll be, if they ever get him behind expectation, he won't make it.
Yeah, I don't think that the trial is going to come up ahead of time. I don't think that the people will stand for that because that is true election interference. It really is. So you can run the rumors around all you want, but if you actually going to have a trial during the campaign, I think the visual on that is way too much for the American people, and then people who are never involved in the process are going to say, "Hey, wait a minute. I mean, how much more obvious can it be?" I mean, we know that everything that Trump has faced up until this point has been a setup.
Yeah.
Everything. I mean, from
Yeah.
from Russian collusion to Mifsud to to Jan 6th. John Eastman is on trial in California. Believe it or not, John Eastman was one of the president's constitutional attorneys, and he's a professor. He's been a well-known professor for a long time, a constitutional professor, and he was the one that believed that Vice President Pence had the ability not
Right.
to overthrow the election, but
But
to
to
at least
not to
postpone the
sign
counting
off. Yeah.
because there had been multiple states that had asked for to take their votes back, their electoral votes, because they found after the fact that there
Hmm.
were some serious problems with the vote tabulation, serious problems. So you had state legislatures who got hosed out of the whole process anyway, constitutionally because of COVID. But you had state legislatures asking. So what Eastman's point was that you can absolutely have the vice president tell these states, sure, you can have it back for a few days. You can give you another week. That would have brought them to January 17th. And if you have nothing by January 17th, well, then guess what? We count the votes and we go forward. And of
Right.
course, and there, Eastman is on trial for that he and President Trump try to overturn the election via January 6th. The guy's on trial. They're going to try to disbar the guy in California. I mean, it's
I'm
just
not surprised. I'm not
it's just an interpretation of the
surprised.
Constitution. I mean, I've heard people say that that's not what that whole electoral count act was, because they got rid of it. If you didn't notice, they got rid of it because they didn't want that to happen again, and which allowed them to cheat a little easier. But
Hmm.
the fact that he's on trial for a constitutional interpretation is just mind blowing. There's a
Yeah.
guy who's he's been a professor for 40 years.
Yeah. You can't. You're not allowed to interpret the Constitution. You can't have. We have thought police now. If you think things that the government finds, um, they don't like it. Not illegal, but they just don't like it. Then you're going to be on trial. We are heading in a very dark. And honestly, with you, John, I wish I had your optimism about the American people and their response to what's happening to Trump, but I just don't have it. I see that we are in the same place that many of the Germans were in, and the famous poet that was, the written that the first they came for this group, and then they came for me, and there was nobody to stand up for me. I just think that's what's happening. I just think people are like, well, they're not actually gonna put Trump in jail, and then when they find him guilty, well, they what? Um, I don't have much faith in the American people. They've not given me anything to hang my hat on at this point in time. I've not been overwhelmed. I mean, listen, I was there November 14th when we had the first sort of protest MAGA march in DC. I went, and I was disappointed by the number of people that showed up. The count was not as significant as I would have expected. With 74 million votes, I would have expected to see at least a million people there. We didn't get there. And then on January 6th, when the president himself had asked people to come, I really expected to see, a million people. Well, again, we didn't get a million people. There just weren't a million people there. And we were played. I mean, they played us. I do think it was all set up. It was all staged. So I say that I don't. I wish I could. I wish, John, that I believe the American people are going to say no, but I just don't think they're going
Yeah,
to do it. I think they're
yeah,
so scared
yeah.
of
I agree
apathetic.
with that. Yeah, they've created an atmosphere where it's really difficult to get engaged in protest. There's no doubt about that. But when it comes to election time, they're going to have to do a whole heck of a lot more cheating than they did last time. And
Yeah,
I know this is anecdotal, but one of the things that I was at least encouraged by was when I was up in New York recently. People who would never support Trump are like, this is out of control. This is out
yeah,
of control. Not just the stuff with Trump,
yeah,
but the gender issues, the drag queen issues. There are
yeah.
communities. You know what the big change is that compared to say 40 years ago, even 20 years ago, the
Right.
working middle class has completely changed. It used to be the silent majority was the disaffected white middle class. Well, you
Hmm.
can take the white out of that now because
Right.
it's just the disaffected working middle class. And
Right.
everybody has had it with all of this, and they might not be saying it publicly because they don't want to maybe disaffect their friends. But I'm telling you, it's a different ballgame. People are just like, this is enough. I mean, they're trying to live in like New York City and San
Hmm.
Francisco and Los Angeles. You can't live in these places anymore. You just can't.
Right.
It's getting harder
Well,
and
even in
harder and harder.
Conway, did you know that Conway, not yesterday, I think it was Tuesday,
Yeah, Tuesday, right?
um, protest against Bellamy because she lied and said that the city council had voted to do this Pride Month thing, and that was not the case. The city council members said, "Oh, wait a minute, we didn't. No, we didn't. No, we didn't." So there was some serious backlash, and city hall because people were, literally out in the streets and they were upset. And of course, there was counter protests and all of that, but I made the point to some folks. I said, well, if they'd done this and if it was Mayor Bethune in Myrtle Beach, nobody'd probably raise much of a stink. But you can't expect folks in Conway and Aner and Longs and some of these more conservative areas to just stand there and accept that, because these are long held conservative bastions. And I don't think folks are going to just be like, okay. But it just further proves that Bellamy is a Democrat, and we need to have her replaced with an actual Republican. So,
Yeah, and I think the other part of that is the council didn't approve it,
yeah,
and she did it anyway. I
yeah.
mean, that should bring out protesters in and of itself.
Well, I think
Just
she should be charged because she lied. She said they did, and they did not. So,
right, but just the fact that
let's get her
you're
out
in
of
a
there.
you're in a representative government, and then you say, "Oh well, the heck with the representatives. I'll just say today is whatever."
Yeah.
It's like the executive order thing, which I've never been a big fan of at the presidential level. If
Hmm.
you can't get it done legislatively, just get a pen out and do what you got to do. And I've been critical of every president that's done that, not just Obama and Biden, but President Trump too. And if you can't get it through Congress, unless it's an issue of national security, I mean a dire emergency, you shouldn't be doing it by the stroke of a pen. Sorry. Well, I think we lost Shannon. I don't know if we're still on there, and I don't know if you can hear me, but we shall see if we can reboot this. Well, I'll try to hold the line here, and this is the beauty of live, if you want to call it podcasting. So we will. I'll try to reboot. We'll be back in a second.
All right, we had a little drop there, so I'm gonna see if we can get John back. So it's what happens when we have it's what happens when we have storms here that are really bad.
There we go.
Here, John. Yeah. Anytime it rains really hard, our internet started like, you know. But while we're on that subject, real quick, I just want to jump in here on this. Last time on Tuesday, we discussed solar flares and problems like that. And so John had actually sent me an article yesterday that talked about the fact that over the Atlantic Ocean, they had some solar flares and it did disrupt some communication. And so I speculated that that might be part of the reason why they lost communication with that submarine, because obviously in the Atlantic Ocean. And then I think even today they were expecting some of that solar flare to affect things. So it wouldn't be a surprise to me at all if we don't have repeated problems with your phones or the internet throughout the day because of that. So if anybody thought that's a legitimate thing. So
No, the
anyway,
timing was good. Yeah.
yeah, if you can pick up where you were talking before we kind of lost you there.
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't even remember where we were.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I was talking about the fact that you have a representative government, in Conway, and you have an executive that's just ignoring the city council. And I
Right,
also spoke about the fact that I'm not a fan of executive orders at the presidential level either. That was put there
right,
basically. There's no mention of it in the Constitution. It was basically put there so that the president could enact legislation that was passed by Congress and could do so with greater expediency, so they speed up the process. And that's why they had executive orders, not to just override the legislative process.
Right, right. And I agree with you. I've never been a fan of executive orders. I've always thought that was power that was not granted to the president by the Constitution. Any president, I don't care who it is. I just never have liked that. Um,
Yeah, I like the idea. I mean, I like the idea of the executive order if it's used properly, meaning that, okay, Congress passed this legislation. We need to get this into place. What do we have to move? You know, are there barriers, legal barriers, or any
mhm.
other issue? Are there barriers that we can, get around that could speed this up so that we, the people's wishes, can be put into place? That I get, and that's what executive
Right.
orders were for. But to just use them to circumvent the legislative process is not why we have them.
Now, I know in some cases, mayors can be fired. They don't have to be impeached. So,
Yeah, it depends on the town laws or whatever,
and I'm not
the
sure what
bylaws.
Conway's what their bylaws are, but I personally hope that she's fired
Yeah,
and removed. Um,
in some states, only the governor can actually do that because the state are is the operation that would approve the charter, and they can actually, if they think an executive is out of control or whatever, they can actually revoke the charter and disband
yeah,
the government. I mean, I'd have to look at the state laws regarding South Carolina, but I know that's the
yeah,
case, that the town can only exist if the state allows it to.
yeah, yeah. It's anyway, that's certainly interesting. I find that it's good that the people were able to kind of get their voices heard and let her know that no, 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 this is not something we accept and push back. And I'm glad to hear that that's happening in places like New York as well, that they're saying enough of this. And man, I hope you're right. I hope that the people will step up and say, this is enough. Um, Understand, I'm not anti-Trump by any means. I'm not. I just really like Ron DeSantis, and I think that he's kind of the future of the party. And I'd be fine if Trump wins and he serves his 4 years, and then we get DeSantis to come in after that for win-win to me. I just don't think they're going to let Trump win. Period. Now, and I don't even know that they're going to let any Republican win, because like you and I talked about this last time, that Trump was in the White House when the 2020 election occurred, and he wasn't able to that took place. So I believe that Biden, not Biden, Biden, he's completely gone. He's
It's not going to be him.
dementia laden. But I do think the Democrats have a plan in place to navigate whoever they pick to be the next president. I think that happens. Very difficult to overcome the cheat. So we got a lot of work to do to make that happen. So I'll just be curious. I mean, let's just go crazy, and let's say that it is this baffled old man, and he gets another 81 million. Is anybody going to believe that? Are they going to believe that he get 81 million after this? I mean, they were on the news yesterday saying that this is a great, and that look at all the good things he's done, and I'm just aghast. Like, what? He's not doing
It,
anything good.
all,
This
all,
man's a joke.
all fake. It's all fake. I mean,
Oh,
they
it's,
just
it's
keep printing
horrible.
money, and we just wait. I mean, when this all tanks, and it's going to be soon, especially if they get rid of the dollar as a world currency, then we're in big trouble. Then we're in
Yep.
big trouble.
Yeah, I'm hearing that's happening in July, so that's next month.
Yeah.
So well,
Well, they're
things are going to go
supposedly.
sideways fast.
I was reading the other day they're going to have a meeting in 60 days to
Yeah.
decide exactly what they're going to do. All of these countries, I think it's 12 countries right
Hmm.
now, and that would be catastrophic for our position in the
Hmm.
world. I mean, if you look
Yep.
at what it did to the British government was the British Empire until 100 years ago,
Yep.
when whenever it wasn't 100 years ago, but when they lost, it's in the
Yeah.
40s, I think,
Yeah.
when they lost currency. 40s is going to be 100 years ago soon. God help us.
Yeah.
Uh, you probably almost 80 years ago when they lost that the British pound as the world currency. I mean, they were never the same. They were never the same. And believe me, we won't be either. You combine that with
Yep.
a $35 trillion debt, and we're dead people walking when it comes to the
Yeah.
economy, and it's coming.
That's 100% accurate. And again, I can't reiterate enough that we need are imported from typically China. So not a good thing. Not a good thing at all. But we do have some good news today. I don't want this to be doom and gloom and agony on me as it's going down rain outside. There is some good news. The fentanyl bill. I lost my cousin Adam, isn't he? And so I know his mom, Patty Roberts, has been pushing hard. Has as my high school friend Holly also Burks, she lost her son Cody to fentanyl poisoning. So they have really worked hard. And if you've been driving around Erie County, you've probably seen some of the signs. Fentanyl kills you. And both Adam and Cody are aboard. And that's not how you want to see your family members remembered as victims of a drug poisoning. But there they are. And so the governor has signed this bill into law, and it's pretty good. It says that if you get dealing 14 grams of fentanyl, that's your first sentencing. And then, of course, the sentencing becomes more extreme at 28 plus grams, so 28 or more grams. Now, folks may think, God, 14 grams, that's not very much. Well, let me explain to you. It takes 2 milligrams to basically kill. My cat is attacking. 2 milligrams to kill you. So 14 milligrams is enough fentanyl to kill 7,000 people. So it may seem like a really small amount of a drug. And then, of course, 28 grams will be enough to kill 14,000 people. So please understand this drug is extreme. In, I believe it was Texas, I want to say it was, there were 3 teen girls the day before graduation found slumped over in a car. 2 of them were dead. One was able to be saved in the hospital. And then now she's been subsequently charged with murder because she provided the fentanyl drug. So, folks, this is not a good drug, and I am so happy that this finally passed. So, shout out and thank you to the legislatures within the state who signed that and pushed that into law. So it needed to happen, and I'm very happy that it did finally take place. So that's a good thing. I know John
Yeah.
and I've talked about it. Well, how many times, John? Yeah,
Quite a few times, and to me, again, as long as the legalese is good, it's a common sense bill, and it shouldn't be a partisan bill at all. There shouldn't be anyone that says, "Oh, if you're going to do that, we should let you out." It's a drug like we've never seen before. This it's not like, I mean, heroin, cocaine, all bad enough, but this is an instant death with a very small amount. So yeah, you should, if you commit that crime, you should obviously pay a very high price. And there's a couple of good things that went on in the legislature, and a couple of things that didn't get done,
yeah,
which is unfortunate. I know that they passed a bill banning biological males from competing in women's athletics, which I think is a great thing. But they weren't able to pass the banning of the gender, quote unquote, gender reassignment surgery on minors.
right. Yeah. Well, let me jump back to the fentanyl real quick and just let you know, in 2023, the legislative session, 46 states legislators sent forward legislation to deal with fentanyl. Virginia lawmakers passed a law and declared fentanyl a weapon of terrorism, which I agree 100% because it could literally be easily used as a weapon of terrorism. Iowa law makes the sale of 5 grams of fentanyl roughly the weight of 5 paper clips, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. Arkansas and Texas recently joined 30 states, including Pennsylvania, Colorado, Wyoming, that have drug-induced homicide statutes on the books, which allows murder prosecutions even of people who share drugs socially. Fentanyl doses, which is or that the 2 girls that died and the one that survived is being charged. The bills are intended to beat back a deadly substance that has infiltrated much of the illicit drug supply in the United States, but they are renewing a debate over whether unsparing law enforcement can be effective and equitable in addressing a public. Definitely need more law enforcement. But again, my big thing is that until the fentanyl crisis is directed at the trafficking of the drug across the border, we're really not going to see a significant change. I don't think. I do think you'll have fewer people to distribute it, but that's only. And this is one of the discussions I've had many times with the folks over there at Fentanyl Kills You here in South Carolina. Most kids have no idea there's fentanyl in this drug. They're told it's a Xanax. They're told it's some other opioid. They don't know it's fentanyl because it's kind of like this. If I gave you something, a bowl of the expression of a bowl of M&Ms and said, here's 100 M&Ms, they're all great except for 2. 2 will kill you. Are you gonna eat any M&Ms? You gonna eat any? You gonna take a couple? You gonna throw a handful in your mouth and 2 of them's deadly? No. So these kids don't know that fentanyl's in the drug. So even if they're distributing it, they're to my friends that could kill them, or give something to take something myself that could kill me. I'm not going to do it. So I don't think they know in many cases the fentanyl's in there. Now, obviously, there are those individuals who are cutting this stuff and mixing it into the other drugs and packing it as the pills. They know, and those folks need to be charged accordingly. But I would guess that this young lady that was in the car with the other succumbed to the fentanyl overdose. I doubt very seriously she was aware that that's what they were taking. So, we've got to do something. We have a major problem with this drug and others. So I'm happy to see this legislation is finally taking hold here. Again, our an obligation to we people to do something at the border to stop this drug from coming across the border, as well as the millions of unknown illegals who are crossing into our country. We talked the other day about China being a threat militarily, and there's been no shortage of video footage demonstrating that Chinese men, not families, but Chinese men are coming across the border. And I have to question, folks, you need to understand, in communist China, you don't get to leave that country and travel across the ocean just on a lark. The government doesn't let you get into the airport and take a flight somewhere and be like, oh yeah, we don't know where you're going or when you're coming back. That's not how that works. So if they're in the South American countries, they didn't, what do you think? They swam across the ocean, John? What do you raft across the ocean? How'd
And
they
yeah,
get there?
that's all part of the CCP's attack on the United States. I mean,
Yeah.
combine the open border with the illegal immigration and a lot of males from all over the world who are draft age coming across that border. And when you throw in the fact that they're behind the manufacturing of all the fentanyl and they're
Yeah.
working in coordination with the cartel, which basically runs Mexico. And
Hmm.
my thing too is, does anybody really think that the drug cartel, that all of these hoods down on the border, you really think they're smart enough to coordinate all of this stuff with the Chinese Communist
No,
Party? I don't.
no way.
So that
No
means
way.
that there's somebody above all of that that is
Yep.
doing this to attack the United States of America. And you know what? Quite honestly, we don't have a country right now, because if you don't have a
Hmm.
border, you don't have a
You don't
country.
have a country.
And we do
So that's
not have a
great.
border on the South. I mean, people just come running in, and it's probably up where somewhere around 7 million now, and adding and
Hmm.
adding and adding. And then when you want to look onto the top of that, I was watching the show yesterday, and they were talking to Dave Walsh, who's an energy expert, and he's been talking for a while. We talked about this the other day about the fact that Texas's grid is really,
In
stressed.
trouble.
Yeah, they're in big trouble because they've had tremendous heat down there.
Yep.
Which is not unusual for this time of year, but
Right.
it's a little early. But they've had very, very warm days. All three-digit temperatures, days and days and days in a row. Well, guess what? Too, that he mentioned, there's over 4 million new people in the state of Texas. Four
I
million.
think half of those are in El Paso on the streets.
Right. So they need electricity too. So not only you cut back all your means of production and you've added 4 million people. So what do you expect to happen? What do you expect to happen? You think windmills, wind farms, and the like are going to solar are going to make up the difference when they only work for a percentage of the day, not like natural gas or anything else that's going 24/7. I mean, these people, they're not stupid. They know that this is going to happen, and they're allowing it to happen. They're allowing it to happen. So this is going to be a chaotic summer. You're going to have brownouts, blackouts. So get used to it. I mean, we hate to be the gloom
Yeah.
and doomers, but I'm telling you, the way it's set up right now, especially once OPEC cut back production, it's going to go up to $80-90 a barrel. So gas will go back up. Just get ready for it. I've said this for a long time. It's not going to end well. This is not going to end well because it's all going to come to a head at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with you. And folks need to be prepared. Yeah, but you know what? Here's the thing I'll say is that up until really the 1950s, air conditioning was not a norm, and most people didn't have it. Wasn't a thing. It didn't exist. Do you ever watch
Well,
the show
I
Mad
didn't
Men?
have it till the eight. Didn't have it till the eight.
I was
We
just
didn't
gonna
have
say,
it
yeah,
until the '80s in New York.
yeah,
Where I lived, we couldn't have it because it wasn't wired for it. I lived in an apartment building, so most of New York didn't have it until the newer construction in the '80s into the
yep,
'90s. So I remember what that was like. I mean, I know it's not quite
yep,
as warm up there as here, but
yep.
those 101-degree days in August in New York with no air conditioning, I remember them very well.
Yeah, I was gonna say. So I'm not. It's not a good thing. It will certainly affect older folks who have become conditioned to, air conditioning, if you will. But I do think that it is survivable not to have AC, or to mitigate how much AC we use. I will say this: I have been into homes, and I don't even know how they do it, where they've got their thermostats set in the summer on like 2, and I'm like, are you even
That's a little
crazy?
expensive. Yeah, yeah,
That's just insane. And we keep ours on 75, 77. And I'm like,
yeah.
how in the world do you guys afford that? That is nuts. So I do think that folks are going to have to start making some sensible decisions on whether you want to have electricity to cook your food or keep your food. Or you want to have your house at meat locker temperature. It's a little nuts. So
And we also have to start holding our local elected officials at the state level. We have to start holding them responsible for legislation that really affects in a negative way the energy industry. And we saw that coming out right at the end
yes,
of the last session. And now you see
yep.
all of these big projects they want to do offshore with the offshore wind farms and everything. That's going to
Hmm.
destroy this coastline. It's going to destroy
Yeah,
it, and it's going
it
to
is.
destroy wildlife as well. We're very good down here about the turtles and keeping your car alive. Don't harass the turtles and everything. And now you're going to build these
Yeah,
farms. You don't think there's going
right.
to be any effect
Exactly. You're
on
killing
nature at
whales and
all?
birds and
What do you?
everything else.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's all right. Yeah, bring the frogs, but kill the whales. I mean, there's no consistency with these people because it's all about
No.
emotion and not fact.
I just wonder who got to it. And now they're actually calling it oh God, what are they calling it? The battery belt, or the battery belt, because we're building
Yeah.
the battery operated car.
Ugh.
Well, that's not the title. I mean, I don't mind being called the Bible belt, but being called the battery belt's a little concerning to me. Because again, folks, the batteries have to be charged. All they do is store electricity that is created by something else, whether it's coal, and I think South Carolina is the third largest state or largest producer of nuclear energy, if I'm not mistaken. Not largest state, largest producer of nuclear energy. Um,
And
a lot, a
that's
lot of
one of the ways.
questions.
Yeah, that's one of the ways
Yeah,
around all of this. It really is
yeah.
nuclear energy, and yet it's like I said, that's the second N word to a lot of people in this country. Oh my God, nuclear
Hmm.
energy, and they're
Oh, can't say
all
that.
screaming 3 Mile Island. That was 50 years ago.
Yeah, so you
That
got
was
Three
50
Mile,
years ago.
Chernobyl, and
Yeah,
then
yeah.
Japan. But
Well,
come
Japan
on, that
was,
was a
yeah,
tsunami and an
right.
earthquake. Come on,
But I mean,
you
the chance
know.
of, but look, I mean, when you have that ability, and look, technology has come a
A
long way in the
long
last
way.
50
Yeah,
years, and they
yeah,
have smaller nuclear facilities that you can build that can
yeah.
generate more locally than these massive ones that you're going to
Listen,
have to do the whole
we have
state.
submarines that are powered by nuclear power.
Yeah.
Come on, subs are nuclear powered, folks. That's how they're able to go out
You go out for
and because
months
if
at a time,
operated, they'd
right?
have to come back in and get fuel or be
Yeah.
refueled at sea. So
And
those
that's
suckers
nothing
go
new,
forever and
right?
ever and ever. No, no, and that is not new. You're right. I was in the service, and we docked a number of nuclear subs, and there was one time we had a little problem because obviously, what do you think keeps the core cool? Water. Well, when you're dry dock, you don't have well, somehow one of the lines got cut, and it was really critical that we got that water back on again before things went really bad. So but yeah, so if they can create a nuclear power source to power a submarine, which even the Trident submarine is about the size of 2 football fields, then come on, we ought to be able to have small substation like nuclear programs that can help power
Yeah, we want
communities.
windmills.
Yeah, 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 because they're really great as long as the wind's blowing, but when the wind stops, that's a problem. And of course, solar, we talked about that. If it's cloudy or it's dark, you're not getting any solar.
Right, and you have to mine a lot of minerals to build those things too. Obviously, the metals that are involved, and then you have to keep them lubricated, which means there's got to be boats out there tending to these things all the time. I mean, it's so beyond what should be acceptable in the mind of common sense uh, that
Yeah.
people have to start questioning a little bit more vociferously what's going on, especially here in South Carolina when you're talking about these massive offshore wind farms. Uh, just for me, a recipe for uh, environmental disaster. Never mind just killing wildlife. If things don't go well, I mean, all they spend at least 5 minutes of every news show here in South Carolina, at least since 2 weeks ago, on hurricane preparedness. Hurricane preparedness. Yet you're going to build all the stuff offshore. Right
Yeah.
offshore. Which way do you think
Yeah.
that storm is coming? Which way? What do you think it's coming? It's
To the
coming from
sea, right?
It's coming from Nebraska, right? It's coming from
Yeah.
Nebraska. That's where the
Of
hurricane's coming from.
course. Yeah.
So, I mean, what are you thinking about? We're in the hurricane belt, and you're going to build wind farms. But nothing will happen to them. Oh, they're hurricane proof. Nothing's hurricane proof. Sorry.
It's going to create a lot of electricity.
Oh yeah, and
Hurricane
that's
force winds.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they'll tell you, oh
Well,
yeah,
you know,
but jobs. It's jobs. It's not the jobs that you need. You'd have more jobs if you could keep energy at a reasonable price by using natural gas and maybe some nuclear and mixing it all together, so we can do this cheaply and not be dependent on countries that hate us.
right. It's funny you should say that about the hurricanes because some from my neighborhood, Forestbrook, have been complaining about the increase in the insurance price. And there was a gentleman said, God, it's $2,100 a year to insure my home. Then the insurance company said it's because of the storms they've had in the last couple of years. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's the price you got to pay for living along the coast. I mean, but I understand if you're going to choose to live in an area that is prone to hurricanes, then you have to expect the insurance company to have to make back some of their money because they can't, they're not on an obligation, as my husband said last night. They're under no obligation to go broke.
Right.
So,
And there's a lot of places where they're pulling out
you
of. They're
know,
pulling out of, parts of
I've heard
Florida, pulling out of
California.
California.
Yeah.
It just, and yet still all the wealthy people who are screaming about climate change, they always buy the beachfront houses. So I don't understand that.
Yes. I don't either.
Sea levels are rising. Let me buy a beach house.
Yes, I know. What was it? Al Gore and Obama was
Everybody,
like,
Obama,
now,
everybody. And hey,
yeah,
that's where I would live. If I had that money, that's
yeah,
where I would live.
yeah,
But don't go
yeah.
around screaming and telling me I should take a bike to work if you're living in a $12 million house on the beach.
Right. Well, speaking of Obama, his I think it's his youngest daughter, Sasha, just graduated from college. They
Boy,
had a picture up and
that
that
makes
of
me feel
her.
old. That makes me feel old.
Yeah, I know. I said the same thing. I was like, how could she be a guy? I thought it was gonna say you graduated high school, and I'd be like, oh wow, high
Yeah.
school. No, college. I'm like, ah.
That was
Jeez, how'd
one
that
thing,
happen?
yeah. In politics, that was one thing, one rule I always had. You don't go after
Oh,
anybody's kids. Don't go after anybody's kids, whether you like them politically or not. You don't go after
yeah,
their kids until they're no longer kids. If they get into
right.
college and they want to start running their mouths about politics, well, then they're fair game. But
Like
before
Hillary's
that,
daughter. Yeah.
leave them alone and let them play ball or
Yes.
let them
Yeah.
do whatever they want to do. They harassed Obama's kids. They followed
That's
Bush's kids
ridiculous.
around. Remember Amy Carter? They made fun
Yeah.
of her on Saturday Night
Mm.
Live, if you remember that, when she was
Yeah.
like 13 years old. I mean, just, leave the
Yeah.
kids
They
out of
made
it.
fun of
It's not
Barron.
their
They said
fault.
he had what they call Barron. They said he had autism or something. I'm like,
Oh
God,
yeah,
come
well,
on, guys.
he's on the spectrum. His father's on the spectrum. Everybody's on the spectrum.
Oh.
But you know what? Just leave them alone. And I will say
Yeah.
that I think Melania Trump, in particular, and President Trump as well, done a great job keeping Barron out of the spotlight. Not just because
Well, he's shot up.
he's 6'9". Yeah,
Holy cow.
yeah,
He was, and his dad, like, what is Trump, 6'4" or something?
yeah. He's 6'3", 6'4", and I think he's 6'3". And if you really want to get an idea, Eric is 6'6". So if
Holy
you
cow. I didn't
go
realize that.
see back, yeah, I got a picture with him, and I look like a lawn jockey. I really do. Next to him, he's 6'6". So if you see Barron next to him, you'll get a real idea on how
Yeah.
big Barron
Well,
is.
I had a picture of Barron beside Trump, and I was like, holy cow. He's
Yeah,
so
but
bad. It's insane.
yeah, they've done a
He's
real
just a
good job of
kid.
keeping him out of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
spotlight. I don't think he turns 16 pretty soon, but they've done a good job of keeping him out of the spotlight. And I think most presidents do. But
Yeah.
it should be,
It's
I
the
don't care. I
media
don't want
that
to hear,
attacks him.
I
I
don't want to
agree
hear
with you.
stories.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear stories. Let
And
him
I'll
play
say,
ball.
last thing I'll say about, I mean, she's a beautiful young lady. They had a couple different shots of her, and she's gorgeous. Um, and I just remember, Obama. She was a big kid. She wasn't a little kid, but he was carrying her on the stage at one point in time. I think it's because she was scared. Then he kind of carried her out there, and it's like, well, you ain't carrying her out there now.
Yeah, no, now, yeah, they're all
So
out of college and
yeah, and I agree
life
with you.
moves on.
As long as they're young and their kids are in school, even if they're in
Leave them
college,
out.
leave them alone. But if they do like Hillary's daughter and they decide to start delving into politics and as adults, then at
Yeah.
that point in time they're fair game because they've entered the foray. So
If you
I've
remember
never been a fan
when
of
the Bush,
yeah
yeah, no, when the Bush
yeah
twins were in
twins
college,
yeah
they'd
you're
catch them,
drinking
20 years old having a beer. Oh my gosh. Yeah,
I
leave
know
them alone. So it's 20, oh my
yeah
gosh, a 20-year-old having a beer, that's terrible in
yeah
college. I
yeah
can't imagine. Yeah,
I imagine
leave
them not
leave
having a beer.
yeah, leave the kids out of it. Just leave them out of
Yeah.
it.
Maybe at a Mormon school, you're not having a beer at 20, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of always joked when I coached collegiately. I told my players, I said, listen, because I was at a junior college when I was a head coach, and I said, and so therefore nobody was 21. I said, ladies, I'm not stupid. I know you're probably going to drink. I said, but here's my rule. When I come in and I do inspections, don't let me find anything. If I find a can, a bottle, a cup, anything, you're running for it. So they did a good job of cleaning up to make sure that there wasn't anything. But there were a couple of times when they, because they're kids. So I came in and they had cleaned, they in their way of cleaning, which you know how kids, you shove it under the bed, you shove it under the cabinet. So I was looking in the trash can, I didn't see anything, and so they had figured that out. They're like, "Oh, coach, you look in the trash can, make sure you empty the trash can." So they had done everything, and I said, "Well, it looks like you got." And I knew they had had a party the night before, so I was like, "I don't think they had time to really clean this place up." I was going to get them out because they were all hungover. Oh, we're good, coach. We didn't get in bed till late. That's why we don't feel good. Oh, is that why you don't feel good? Okay. So they're just blah blah blah. We didn't do anything. We're good. And so I walk casually over to the kitchen sink, and I'm just leaning up against the kitchen sink, and I reach down and I grab both the doors of the kitchen sink and I flip them over. That's where all the cans were. They were under the kitchen
Well,
sink, and I was
yeah,
like,
they'll
"Oh,
find a
what is
way, no
this?"
doubt. They'll find a way. I was around Division I college
Yeah,
athletics for a long time, almost 30 years, and
yeah,
I had friends that played D1 basketball growing up, and of course, when I was coming up, it was 18 to drink,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I remember the players and the coaches telling me stories when it was 18 to drink that if they won, they'd have beer on the bus back from the game, coaches and the
yeah,
players,
yeah.
because they're 20, 21, and it was
Take a
18.
drink.
So
Yeah,
things really change. I am not a supporter of that. I have always been a
yeah,
supporter of
yeah,
18. A while
yeah,
back, and I used to talk about this in school. There were 110 college presidents, college and university presidents,
yeah.
who drew up a petition to get it back to 18, the drinking age back to 18. And here was their logic. They said
Saves trouble.
that when it was 18, it was much easier to manage the alcohol issue on a university campus. Because
Yes.
if you could drink at 18, a lot of the parties were in the dorms, happened
Hmm.
right on the campus, and they could keep an eye on things, and they would keep the kids on the campus so they wouldn't get in trouble. When it went
Right.
to
No
21,
DUIs, etc.
everybody's leaving the campus, they're going into town, they're engaging with the local police. If something happens,
Hmm.
you have DWIs, and their idea was every high school senior should take an
Yeah.
alcohol awareness class similar to what
Right.
you take after you get arrested for DWI after the
Yep.
fact. So this is proactive. You take a class, you pass the class, and then you can drink at 18. And if you get jammed up one time, if you're charged and found guilty and alcohol was involved, well, then you don't drink until you're 21. I thought that was a great idea, just a
Yeah,
great
I
idea.
agree. I like that as well. That makes the most sense to me because kids are going to drink, and I think there was a similar attitude in El Paso, Texas, with the base of the with the soldiers. So what they
Right.
decided to do is because the soldiers 18, that's the 21 is a law in Texas. So what these soldiers were doing is they were going across the border into El Paso, where not El Paso, into Juarez, Mexico, where they could drink
To,
at 18.
right.
So then you got all kind of problems because now they're in another country and they're getting drunk and stupid. So what they decided to do, which was really smart, they said drinking age is 18. So you cannot leave the base and go drink if you're 18. So just like those professors said, the soldiers stayed on the base and they drank. Much easier to control because you got military police there if anything gets rowdy. You don't have the DUI issues because they're not driving anywhere. They're stumbling to and from their barracks. And see if they, somebody does something really stupid, they get something, whatever. Then in the military, you get some time in the old lockup, and they take away some of your pay, and that tends to get your attention
Yeah.
in the service.
And that
So I
was,
agree.
obviously that's not a national law. That's done on a state by state basis.
Right.
But what happened
Right.
was back in the day, the federal government decided that any state that did not comply with the 21, that the federal government
Was going
would
to lose
withhold all
funding for
highway
the
funding.
highways.
Right. But
Yep.
here's the buried lead that nobody seems to want to talk about. In the Obamacare decision, the Supreme Court decision, one of
Yeah.
the issues in that case was that the federal government was doing the same thing. They were basically blackmailing states into becoming part of Obamacare by dangling the money. Say, okay, if you don't if you don't become part of Obamacare, you don't get the funding from the federal government. The
Right.
Supreme Court said that is unconstitutional in and of itself. It's unconstitutional to
Good.
do that, for the federal government to waive the money. So that
Good.
means that if any state in the union wanted to go back to 18, the federal government cannot withhold their highway funds.
I like that. Well, folks, that brings us to our hour, and that went fast, but it was a great show today. I hope you all enjoyed it, and you'll tune in next week when we come back on Tuesday. But that's all I have. John, thanks for being back, and good to have you back. As always, Godspeed, God bless, and folks, we will see you next time.